Okay, so today we have with us Rashid Kotwal from Revealed. It's been a long day. Rashid from Revealed Resources. Rashid, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Jason, and good to be here. So before I start, I'd like to just set an overall frame for what we're going to be talking about. And my particular passion, while we're here to talk about improving sales performance, I'm really passionate about helping business owners create an asset and a legacy out of their businesses, given all the hard work that they're going to be doing over the years and the risks they're going to be taking. So given this, I'm just going to share my screen a couple of times, and this is a ladder that describes the journey that I believe every business goes through. And while I'm just talking about the ladder for a couple of minutes, just think about where you happen to be on it. So at the instability, well, let's not talk about the drowning phase. The drowning phase is where you're going out of business. But let's just say you're unstable and you're reasonably vulnerable because your cash flow is inconsistent. Maybe you're reliant on too few clients. If somebody goes away, you could be in a lot of trouble. In today's world, sales processes and sales cycles are getting longer and longer. And your marketing and sales process is reasonably haphazard. And if you rely on referrals, you may not be getting enough referrals. And your job is to move into a stability stage where you're relatively secure. Your clients pay you on time, your income is stable, and you have enough clients to move into a consolidation phase where you start talking about leadership of your organization, which then allows you to expand and eventually create an asset, which comes in two forms. Our recommendation is always make money as you're going along, take that money out of the business and slot it away in something that produces income, whatever that is, whether it's shares, property, some other form of investment. The long-term goal with most businesses is, of course, to sell the business. Now, the reality is that very often doesn't happen. Statistically, only about 4% of businesses ever get sold for any sort of decent money. So you're much better off making money as you go along, which you can then slot away. Now, the only way you can make money is to sell. So no matter how good you are at delivery, unless you can sell and attract the right sorts of clients to you, nothing is ever going to happen. So today we're just going to talk about a couple of things. One is improving sales performance, which is minimizing the time and effort taken to close deals. And we want to reduce the risk that deals fall over at the last moment, because I can tell you a number of cases where I've seen recently where people have worked on deals for sometimes even a year. And right at the last moment, literally the day before the contract was going to get signed, they get blindsided by somebody else in the organization that they had not spoken to. They had no idea this person existed, who says, oh, but actually we're doing something over here. And there goes the deal. I've seen that happen time and time again. So there are three major challenges when it comes to selling in this environment. Sales is actually about decisions. It's about helping your client decide and how to make a decision to buy. It's not actually about your product and service. It's actually about figuring out what is their decision-making process and what would get them to move the sale forward. And always remember that whenever we're looking to buy something, especially, and we're talking B2B environments, we're talking about change. And your customers, you're asking your customers to make a change of some description, to move away from some status quo to something else. And all change ultimately is emotional. And being emotional, it is always difficult because as human beings, we generally do not like change. So one of the things you're always going to be battling with is the status quo. Is the pain of change greater than the pain of staying where you are? Because if you're okay with where you are, it's okay, it's not that bad. Why would I go through the hassle of changing? Why would I go through the hassle of paying, doing all of the work involved, only to find that it wasn't worth it in the long run? And the third thing you have to be very cognizant of is the value. And the value of the change. So we all buy things to either move away from a product of a problem or to move towards some sort of aspiration. And what we need is a gap between where they are now and where they want to get to. And we have to realize that being emotional, there are 6 major drivers that drive all of us. And those drivers are money, time, status, well-being, happiness, well-being and happiness, capability, and energy. So let me just talk about that for a second, okay? Whenever we're talking to somebody, it is about, the change is about either making more money or losing money or saving money. I'm going to help you make money. I'm going to help you save money. I'm going to help you get back time. I'm going to stop you wasting time. I'm going to increase your status and well-being, or could there be a risk that this is not going to improve my status and well-being? And when you're dealing with organizations, status and well-being is actually one of the major drivers. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French general, was famous for saying, recognition, babies cry for it, grown men die for it. And when you're dealing with an organization, status is one of the biggest issues that you're going to come across. And status plays out this way. It could be, will recommending this particular product or service enhance my status? As in, am I going to get a promotion? Or is it a risk for me in some form? If it doesn't work, is this going to be a career limiting move? Are they going to point the finger at me? And it's one of the biggest drivers of sales and stops sales going ahead. Well-being. Is this something that enhances my lifestyle or doesn't? Is it going to give me more time so that I can do other things with my life or not? Do I have the capabilities to do this or not? And the last one is energy. Do I have the energy? Do I want to put in the effort to do whatever this thing is going to take or not? And so whenever you're looking at any sale, you need to understand the motivations of every individual involved that or could be involved in the deal. Now, this is especially true when you're dealing with anything where there are multiple stakeholders. Now, multiple stakeholders could mean a husband and wife partners. It could be in the private space. It could be in a business space. You're going to have today a number of different people who could and will likely be involved in the sale. So traditionally, we would always said there was one major economic buyer, and the economic buyer is the person who ultimately signed the check and said, you know, I'm going to spend the money, the decision maker, if you like. But there are a whole bunch of influencers, sometimes on a committee, sometimes just people who are involved in the decision, that could kibosh the deal if you don't know what their agendas are. So whenever we're dealing with a multi-stakeholder sale, and anybody who deals with anything technical is likely to be dealing with a multi-stakeholder sale, because there's somebody in the business who's involved in the decision. There is somebody in the technical area who's involved who might say yes or no for whatever reason. And then there are the users. And the biggest mistake that we see people make is actually not involve the users in the decision as to whether this thing is actually going to be used or not. So one of our clients at a recent boot camp sells procurement software for marketing companies so that they can actually buy marketing services. And it's a SaaS product. That means they sell it on a monthly basis. And they're reasonable sized deals, you know, might be $20,000, $30,000 a month deal going forward. So it's a reasonable deal. But what they find is that somebody in the business says, yeah, this is really good because we can save all of this money on our procurement. So they then go ahead and implement it, only to find that in a month or 2 months or 3 months, none of the users actually use the product, because nobody actually involved the users and said, hey, this is how you actually use it. This is how you're going to save time. This is how you're going to save money. This is how your life is going to be easier. The users don't like change. They're used to doing whatever they used to do. And so within a month, 2 months, 3 months, all of a sudden, business goes, why are we paying whatever amount of money we're paying every month? And they kill the deal. Now, that's just a modern example. I could go over history and say there are dozens of examples. Another company I did some work with well over a couple of decades ago spent $100 million putting in an SAP product. They went live on one weekend after 2 years worth of work and $100 million, 100 people sitting in an office doing all of this. They went live over one weekend only to find that the users in the test site couldn't process an order. 2 years worth of work went down the drain because nobody actually involved the users. So if you're doing any form of B2B, you must involve everybody involved. And you need to find out what each person's personal agenda is as well as the business agenda. Because what's good for the business is not always good for the person concerned. Usually because it's some form of status or fear or risk involved. And a couple of examples. So one of our clients does Industry 4 consulting to manufacturers. Now, believe it or not, in Australia, manufacturing efficiency is around 30%. In Europe, it's around 85 to 90%. There's a huge gap. So he goes into these organizations and he says, listen, I can improve your performance. The owners of the organization, the board say, oh, this is fantastic. Of course, I'd love to do this. It's the business that wants to do this. But very often the deal gets kiboshed because somebody like a plant manager goes, I could lose my job. Why didn't I think of this? My status and reputation is at risk. And therefore, even though it's in the best interest of the organization, it's not in that person's best interest and the deal goes south. And that's why you need to figure out exactly what's going on with each particular person. So whenever we're dealing with anybody in any sales situation, there are a number of things you need to look at. And this is, I'll just go through. Share that screen again. You need to look at what we call the demand triangle. And this is one of the fundamental models that we use in our business to define what it is that you do. So we all buy things to solve problems and get outcomes. So you need to get your message absolutely dialed in to what are the very specific problems that you solve and what are the very specific outcomes that you get for a very specific market. So you need to know, you need to come at it from the problem and the outcome, and then you need to decide exactly who this market is. So the demographics are all of the physical things like the industry, the size, the types of people you're dealing with, the location, all of those sorts of things. But the psychographic is even more important. The psychographic is what are the values and beliefs? How do these people actually think? Are they even interested in this sort of solution? Because the biggest mistake that we make is that we target the wrong people. So you could have a bad message or a relatively mediocre message targeting exactly the right people, and it would still get through. But you could have a fantastic message, but target people who aren't interested, and you'll get nowhere. It's pretty obvious when you think about it that way. And at the bottom, we have traffic and conversion. So traffic is, we know what the problems and outcomes are. We know who we're going for, but can we actually get in front of these people? Do we know where they are? And what are the economics of getting in front of them? How much do I need to spend on advertising? What does the ROI on each person coming into the funnel bring? What does it cost me to do this? And what is the conversion rate? Yeah, how do I get that conversion rate up so that the ROI improves? So let me just stop and ask a couple of questions. Does anybody resonate with that? Anybody want to comment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. So I'm somebody that has sold to small companies and big companies. I've been in big companies where I've seen that happen. You know, especially the career limiting move scenario there. It's a common one. When I was working at Konica Minolta, there was a new automated system that everybody went, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. But 3 people refused to implement it because they knew that this is not something that's going to benefit them. Would save the company millions, but they might lose their jobs over it. So it never got pushed through. So yeah, so I know I get what you're saying there, and it's good to rehash all this. You forget things. I've been taking screenshots of everything you're putting up at the moment. Sorry, I just took over the presentation there.
That's all right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about even if the majority of people that you're negotiating with approve of the proposal, that there might be one or two people who don't, and that can bring everything undone. So as a hypothetical, are you suggesting that if I speak with somebody about a potential project, especially a bigger project, I should always be asking them if there's anybody else involved in the final decision-making process? And if they say yes, I should request to speak to the other people involved individually and get a better idea of what their objections might be and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Now, what will happen very often is people like to big note their own status.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, is there anybody else? They'll say, oh, no, I'm the person. Don't talk to anybody else. One way of putting this, which I quite like, is who would feel left out if they weren't consulted? It's very subtly different.
That's a good way of putting it, because the other way their ego's involved, but in this way you take their ego out of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
The dealing with figuring out exactly who's who in the zoo is one of the key areas where people come unstuck. So we had a client who does major hospital refurbishment, and they had done, I don't know, a number of refurbishments for a particular organization, and they were out to tender in another location. And the client, as in the end client, knew the organization really well. They knew their capabilities. They never bought on price. They were always somewhere in the middle. And I said to them, oh, okay, so you're in a different area. Who are you dealing with? And they said, oh, look, there's a panel of people. 3 out of the 4 we know really well because we deal with them all the time. There's a 4th one who happens to be the local bean counter, local accountant. Okay. And I said, okay, what do you know about this person? No, not much. I said, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go through the tender response line by line and explain in real detail why you have done each one of those things to this particular person and get this person to understand what the value is. Guess what? They didn't do it. And guess what? They lost a $5 million deal because of it, because everybody else said yes. He was one person on a committee who said no. So always realize that in any sort of sale where there are multiple people involved, all it takes is generally one person who is influential enough to say, nah, this ain't gonna happen. Another client of ours, he told me this sob story the other day. He said he'd been working with an organization for a year. And the day before the deal was going to be signed, the global CEO said, oh, by the way, have you spoken to HR? And he hadn't. They went off to HR, and HR said, well, actually, we've been working on our own system for a year. They went the deal. And I can tell you story after story after story of incumbency where people got lazy and they didn't actually work the organization and figure out what could have changed in the organization. So whenever you're talking to anybody in an organization, and be that a single sale, if you were a financial planner or a copywriter or what you do, Alan, you need to know what the problem is that this person is having, and you need to know a couple of things. One is the aspiration, where they want to get to, and where they are now. And you need to basically use a pendulum. And I got this idea from Steve Brosman. I really like it, but I've added a little bit to it. And he has this sales pendulum where you've got the pendulum, and I'll show you the screen because I think it is a really good model. And basically you're looking at pain, because pain drives people to take action. Aspiration in the distance is sometimes too far out there. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So You're looking at a particular problem and you're looking at a tangible impact of this problem. So if this problem isn't solved, what is going to happen? So what? And you can just keep asking that question. So what? What's going to happen if it doesn't happen? Oh, what's the impact of that? And what you're looking is for some impact in the area of time, money, status, well-being, capability, or energy. Okay. So some form of negative that is going to happen, but you need to move this into the realm of emotions, because emotions drive people to take action. So we all buy because of emotion, and then we justify because of logic. Whether that justification is to ourselves, it's to somebody else, it might be the community, it might be your friends, it might be your partner, it might be your boss. We're looking for logical reasons to justify an emotional purchase. But the thing is, you can't just leave somebody in pain. You've got to swing them across to the gain or the aspiration. And so if I solve this particular problem, what is the tangible aspect? What am I going to get in time, in money? Status and well-being and happiness, status, well-being, and energy are emotional. Time and money are tangible. They're tangible things. Okay? And the greater the swing, the more likely they are to do something. So if you just take a small swing, you're not going to get very far. The bigger that you can make the swing, the more likely they are to do something. Now, the trap here is to just talk about aspiration. So some of us are old enough to have been in Amway.
No, never did it.
Nah, never did it. Okay.
Constantly asked to be, always said no.
Okay, very, very wise. Okay.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. All right. So I don't know what they're like now, but back in the day, you would call somebody up and you would say, hey, listen, will you come to a business meeting? And of course, when they turned up, assuming, of course, they didn't say, is it Amway? Click. You then showed them the plan. And the plan was you drew these circles where you showed them this wonderful lifestyle that they could have. And back in the day, that lifestyle was, a couple of $100,000 a year, which back in the day was a lot of money. And you'd show them this book of the rich and famous and all of these people with this wonderful lifestyle and the holiday, et cetera, et cetera. And everyone would be salivating and going, oh, this is really fantastic. I'm here today. This is where I want to get to in 3 to 4 or 5 years. Until they had to make the first phone call. Because at some point you realize that you can't build a business, any sort of network business, on your friends and family. You've got to go out and find people. But the first people you ring, of course, are your friends and family. And the first thing they say is it Amway? And you go, yes. And they go, click. But I can guarantee you, after the second or third or fourth phone call, where people just go click, the gain and the aspiration wasn't big enough for them to keep going. And they would quit. So when you're dealing with anybody in a sales situation, the pain has to be big enough for them to take action, but the aspiration also has to be big enough and balanced so that they keep going, because nobody wants to just sit in pain. We all want to get somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, as Ben says, the devil is in the details. Sell the dream and make the detail look safe and easily manageable. Absolutely. So the other thing that we notice is very often people come in with these huge programs. I'm going to change the business. I'm going to change the culture of the organization. I'm going to do all of these wonderful things. And people just go, oh, good God, this is going to take years. It's going to be a lot of work. The smartest thing you can do is to thin slice something. So I got a colleague, Donna McGeorge. And Donna McGeorge is very well known in her slice of the industry for doing cultural change in very large organizations. But she doesn't go in with that. What she goes in with the 25-minute meeting, how to have, double your productivity in half the time. And she's written a book, and it's a thin slice. So what is the biggest issue that people have in corporates? They have too many bloody meetings. So if I can show you how to reduce the number of meetings, and I'll maybe charge you $1,000 or $2,000, or you buy the book for $25, and then I charge you a couple of $1,000 to do this, it gets me in the door. And when I'm in the door, I can start moving through the organization, which leads me to the last major point that we talk about, which is this. So when we deal in any multi-stakeholder organization, and just about every deal today is in some form multi-stakeholder, because you might come in with a technical solution and you might decide that you're going to talk to the technical people, but you've still got to take this up to the business, because the business makes the buying decision more than likely. So you've got to figure out who's who in the zoo. Therefore, you've got to network your way through the organization. Now, you can either, you do that by talking to people in the organization, but you might also have people outside the organization who knows somebody in the organization, and they can say, hey, listen, you need to talk to Jason, or you need to talk to Alan, or you need to talk to Ben, because Ben is an influencer. And once you have that network that you start building up, you need to navigate and connect with those people. And once you've connected with those people, you need to find out what each person's personal and business agenda is and what their level of influence is. And this is like going back to the old days when, you know, they used to negotiate with the Japanese, and beware of the quiet one in the corner. It's the person with the power. So you can't take anything for granted, and you can't take things at face value. So you've got to be able to negotiate with each person involved in the decision as to what they would want to get out of this and why they should move this decision forward. And always realize, and so if we look at how sales has changed today from maybe, you know, 35, 40 years ago, certainly if you were in the IT industry, you know, people would just go, you know, sell to the top. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM because IBM went to the board. All very well and good. Doesn't work like that quite the same way today. It still does to a certain extent, but not the same way. Today, you might be coming in to a technical person or even a user who then has to sell the idea up the food chain to the business. And that's when you have to start networking and helping that person and saying, okay, if you're really enthusiastic about this, how can I help you move this up to the next level and the next level and the next level, and take it from, say, a user solution or a technical solution to a business strategic solution where the business says, yes, I want to do this. Because the business is usually the one with the money. It's not usually the user. It's not usually the technical people. Can be, depending on what you're selling, but anything that's a reasonable size deal, the business is going to be involved. And this is where I see people go really wrong, because they just focus too low. Or they focus too high and they don't get involvement of everyone in the food chain, so that the thing gets implemented, but it never actually gets used. So one of those two things happen. So it's really incumbent on you to understand exactly who your target market is and what it is that's going to drive each individual to making a decision in your favor.
Fantastic.
Comments?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, look, I've heard this time and time again over 35 years of being out in the sales market, but I love hearing it again and again from different people presenting, because there's a lot of stuff there that I knew but I forgot, and you've even brought into my mind a few things that I never thought about it that way. So I really enjoyed that, Rasheed. Thank you very much. Now, before I stop recording,
just one more thing, if I may.
Yep.
Because I just turned the paper over. Whenever you're talking to somebody, there are one of three commitments that you want to push for. So I learned this bit of one of the ethoses from someone years ago. He said, never leave a meeting without booking another meeting.
Oh, we went through that this morning at Be Connected, didn't we?
Because what happens? What normally happens? Okay, you say, look, I'll get back to you, or whatever. Okay, and then you start playing tag, and you never actually reconnect. Yeah. Okay, so one of the three commitments is calendar. So when you're talking to somebody who says, okay, can we set up another date? Even if they don't keep it, at least it's in the diary. There's a commitment. Can we set up another date and put it in the diary? If that's one commitment. Another commitment might be, who do I need to talk to? You need to talk to Fred over there. Okay. Can I get a commitment that you will introduce me to Fred? And can we do this now? I've been in situations where I've been on site somewhere and I've said to them, hey, listen, I've driven for an hour to get here. Would Fred be around? And they say, yeah, I can check. Can you pick up the phone? Fred, can you give me 10 minutes? Just doing that led to one of the biggest sales that I made to St. George Bank, just by going, is that person around? Okay. And the last commitment that you want to get is cash. Can I get contract? Can I get some form of money on the table? So you want to push for one of those three commitments.
Beautiful. Fantastic. So Rasheed, for the people that are watching the recording of this, if people want to connect with you and find out more information, how do they get hold of you?
Okay. The easiest way is to contact me at revealedresources.com, REVEALED, resources, plural.com. And my phone number in Sydney is 0414 91 334. And look, I have tons of free resources on our site. We have, I think, over 900 articles and videos that go into all manner of sales, marketing, and leadership. So by all means, give me a hoy. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, I'm always on your blog. I'm always looking through it. It's huge, it really is. So Rasheed, thank you very much. We'll stop the recording now.